In a dusty Georgia diner, 2025, Marcus Caldwell, 52, sips coffee, his khaki trousers and white shirt plain. Officer Daniel Holt storms in, misreads Marcus's wallet grab as a threat and slaps him hard. Patrons gasp, phones out. Backup cops rush in, but Marcus flashes his military ID, 4-star general. Holt freezes, face pale. The diner buzzes, yet Holt mutters a chilling threat, hinting at vengeance. Marcus's future darkens. What will Holt do next? Before we dive deeper, let us know where you're watching from. If you stand for justice, hit like and subscribe, because tomorrow's episode is unmissable. Marcus Caldwell sat in the back of a police cruiser, wrists bound by cold steel cuffs, the Georgia dusk smearing orange across the sky. The diner's neon sign flickered in the distance, a fading memory of coffee and normalcy. His cheek still, stung from Officer Daniel Holt's slap, a sharp reminder of how quickly things had spiraled. 30 years in the military, from a scrappy enlistee in 1995 to a 4-star general, one of the highest-ranking black officers in American history, and yet here he was, reduced to a suspect in a rural town's power play. He'd faced gunfire in deserts, negotiated with warlords and briefed presidents, but nothing prepared him for the raw humiliation of this moment. His khaki trousers and plain white shirt, chosen for discretion during a covert Pentagon trip, now marked him as just another black man in the wrong place. Marcus's mind raced back to his first deployment, a kid from Chicago's South Side dodging bullets in a foreign land, proving his worth to skeptical commanders. Every promotion had been a battle against doubt, every star on his shoulder a defiance of those who saw his skin before his service. Now in 2025, he was in Georgia for a classified meeting about cyber threats, a mission so sensitive he'd driven himself, avoiding official transport. The diner was supposed to be a quick stop, a chance to blend in, but Holt had shattered that illusion with one swing. Marcus's jaw tightened as he recalled Holt's eyes, not just angry but gleeful, as if the slap was a long-awaited release. The cruiser's radio crackled, pulling him back. Holt's voice, smug and clipped, barked orders to the backup officers now surrounding the diner. Marcus's military ID, a laminated card that had opened doors in war rooms, lay discarded on the passenger seat, marked by the cops who'd arrived. They'd barely glanced at it before Holt declared it probably fake. The diner's patrons, a mix of truckers and locals, had been stunned into silence, their phones raised to capture the chaos until Holt's bellowing sent them scrambling. Marcus caught a glimpse of a young woman, maybe 20, slipping her phone into her pocket, defiance in her eyes. Maybe she'd gotten footage out. Maybe it would matter. But hope felt thin as the cruiser bumped along the gravel road toward the station. Inside the diner, Holt's aggression had only grown after Marcus's revelation. The general's calm, steady voice honed in crisis had demanded Holt step back and verify the ID. Instead, Holt doubled down, accusing Marcus of stirring trouble and disrespecting law enforcement. His backup, 2 younger officers with nervous hands on their holsters, followed his lead, their smirks betraying the same bias. They didn't see a general. They saw a black man who dared to challenge their authority. The diner's air had thickened with tension, coffee cups abandoned, the clatter of forks gone silent. A white-haired cook behind the counter, his apron stained with grease, had watched with a strange intensity, his eyes darting to Holt. Marcus hadn't missed it. The subtle nod between them, a signal something was coming. He'd trained for this, reading rooms, spotting threats, but he hadn't expected the cook to slip behind a counter and nudge a steak knife onto the floor near Marcus's booth, its blade glinting under the fluorescent light. The move was slick, practiced, and Marcus's gut twisted. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was a setup. Holt had pounced on the knife like a predator, holding it aloft as if Marcus had brandished it. "Weapon on the scene!" he'd shouted, his voice carrying to the patrons, who murmured in confusion. Marcus's protest, firm but controlled, was drowned out by Holt's accusations. The backup officers moved in, one grabbing Marcus's arm, twisting it behind his back. The cuffs snapped on, and the diner blurred as they dragged him out, Holt leading the charge. The patrons' faces, a mix of shock and fear, faded into the night. Now in the cruiser, Marcus's mind worked overtime. He'd faced ambushes before, but this was different. This was home soil, where his stars meant nothing. To men like Holt. The station loomed ahead, a squat brick building with flickering lights. Holt climbed out, slamming the door, and hauled Marcus from the back seat. The gravel crunched underfoot as they marched him inside, the air thick with cigarette smoke and stale coffee. The desk sergeant, a burly man with a buzz cut, barely looked up from his paperwork. "Another one, Holt?" he grunted, his tone bored. Holt tossed Marcus's ID onto the desk. "Says he's a general. Check it." The sergeant snorted, flipping the card over like it was a fake driver's license. "Stolen valor, probably. We'll sort him out." Marcus stood tall, his voice cutting through the haze. "Call the Pentagon. Verify my rank. I'm General Marcus Caldwell, United States Army." The sergeant's eyes narrowed, but Holt stepped in, his breath hot. "You're nobody here, pal. Nobody." The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. Marcus's heart pounded, not from fear but from rage, the kind that had fueled him through every barrier in his career. He'd fought too hard, lost too much, to let this stand. But Holt wasn't done. He leaned close, his whisper venomous. "You think that ID saves you? This town's mine." The sergeant nodded to the backup officers, who pushed Marcus toward a holding cell. As they passed a break room, Marcus caught sight of a TV screen, local news already buzzing. A grainy phone video from the diner played on loop, Holt's slap, echoing in pixelated clarity. The ticker read, "Suspect in custody after diner altercation." No mention of his rank, no hint of the truth. The cell door clanged shut, but Marcus's focus shifted to the diner again. That cook, the knife, Holt's confidence, it was all too clean. He replayed the scene, the cook's quick hands, the way Holt's eyes had flicked to the knife before finding it. So a frame job, plain and simple. Marcus's training kicked in, analyzing, strategizing. He needed to reach General Ellis, his Pentagon ally, but his phone was with Holt, likely being processed. The cell's concrete walls offered no answers, only the distant hum of the news broadcast. Then a new sound, footsteps. Holt appeared, flanked by the cook, now out of his apron, his grin cold. "Found this in your booth," the cook said, holding up a plastic bag with the knife now smudged with prints Marcus knew weren't his. Holt's smile widened. "Assaulting an officer, carrying a concealed weapon. You're done, General." Marcus's blood ran cold, but his voice stayed steady. "You won't get away with this." Holt laughed, tossing the bag to the sergeant. "File it. Charge him." The cook slipped away, and Holt lingered, his eyes gleaming with triumph. Marcus sat on the cell's bench, his mind racing. 30 years of service, countless missions, and now this. A small-town cop with a vendetta and a system rigged to back him. The diner incident wasn't random. It was a spark, and Holt was fanning it into a fire. Marcus thought of his wife, Lena, and daughter Aisha, safe in Virginia, unaware of the storm coming. He had to warn them, had to fight. But as the cell door locked, the weight of Holt's words sank in. This town was his, and Marcus was alone. The news played on, the video, spreading the truth buried. Marcus's victory in the diner, that moment when Holt froze, felt like a lifetime ago. Now the real battle was beginning, and it was bigger than one cop, one knife, one lie. It was a war against a system that saw him as less, always had, always would. He closed his eyes, not in defeat, but in focus. He'd survived worse. He'd survive this. But Holt's parting words echoed, "This is just the start." The interrogation room smelled of mildew and despair, its grey walls closing in on Marcus Caldwell as he sat, still cuffed under a flickering bulb. The station's clock ticked past midnight, each second a reminder of how far he'd fallen in. Hours. Officer Daniel Holt's frame job had landed him here, the planted knife now a noose tightening around his 30-year military career. Across the scratched metal table, Sergeant Vickers, a barrel-chested man with a permanent scowl, flipped through a file, his eyes glinting with contempt. Marcus's military ID, once a symbol of his 4-star general rank, sat discarded beside. A half-empty coffee mug dismissed as a prop. Vickers leaned forward, his voice a low growl. "You expect me to believe you're some big-shot general? In that get-up?" Looks like stolen valor to me. Marcus's chest tightened, but his training kept his face stone cold. 30 years of leading troops, outsmarting enemies, and defying odds as a black man in the army had taught him control. "Call the Pentagon," he said, each word deliberate. "Verify my rank. I'm General Marcus Caldwell." Vickers snorted, tossing the ID aside. "We don't call nobody. You're just another liar with a story." Holt slunk into the room, his smirk sharper than the knife he'd pinned on Marcus. "He's got a rap sheet now, Sarge. Assault, concealed weapon, resisting. Found that blade right by his seat." Marcus's pulse spiked, rage simmering beneath his calm. The lie was bold, the setup bolder. He'd seen Holt's type before, men who thrived on power, who saw his skin and nothing else. But this wasn't just Holt. It was the station, the town, a system that let men like him thrive. Vickers shoved a paper across the table, a pre-written confession. "Sign this. Admit you carried that knife, swung at Holt. Save us the trouble." Marcus's eyes locked on the paper, then on Vickers. "I'm not signing a lie." Holt slammed a fist on the table, the mug rattling. "You think you're special? You're nothing here." The words echoed the diner, Holt's threat after. Marcus's ID froze him. This wasn't about a misunderstanding, it was personal. A vendetta Marcus couldn't yet trace. He thought of Lena and Aisha, his wife and daughter safe in Virginia, oblivious to this nightmare. He needed to reach them, but his phone was gone. Evidence in Holt's hands. Marcus shifted, testing the cuffs, his mind racing for an out. He'd contacted General Ellis, his Pentagon ally, from the diner before Holt confiscated his phone. If Ellis got the message, help might come. But the station's phone rang, and Vickers answered, his face darkening. "Yeah, patch it through." Marcus's hope flared, but Vickers hung up, his scowl deeper. "Some guy claiming to be a general. Didn't sound right. We're holding you till we sort this." Marcus's stomach sank. The call had been intercepted, likely by someone in Holt's pocket. He scanned the room, catching a glimpse of a female dispatcher through the glass, her eyes darting away too quickly. She'd heard the call, maybe blocked it. The web was tightening, and Marcus was the fly. Holt leaned close, his breath sour. "Your kind always thinks they can talk their way out. Not this time." The racial jab landed like a punch, but Marcus held his ground, his voice steady. "You're digging your own grave, Holt." The officer's laugh was cold, but his eyes flickered, a crack in his bravado. Vickers stood, motioning Holt out. "Lock him up. We'll deal with him tomorrow." As they shoved Marcus toward a holding cell, he caught a TV in the break room. The same diner video from earlier, now twisted. A local news anchor, her voice dripping with bias, branded him a dangerous imposter who'd attacked an officer. The ticker screamed, "Military fraud suspect in custody." Marcus's name, his face, his life smeared across screens. The dispatcher, now at a desk, typed furiously, her glance at Holt too familiar. She'd leaked the story, Marcus realized, feeding the media Holt's lies. The cell door slammed, the lock's clang final. Alone, Marcus sat on the bench, his mind a battlefield. 30 years of service, from desserts to boardrooms, and now this. A small-town station tearing him down. He thought of his first command, the whispers behind his back, the doubts he'd crushed with results. This was no different, just uglier. But Holt's reach was long, and the news was spreading. By morning, the nation would know Marcus Caldwell as a fraud, not a hero. Outside, the station's parking lot buzzed with new sounds. Chants, shouts, a growing crowd. Protesters, some waving signs for justice, others hurling slurs, their voices clashing in the humid night. Marcus couldn't see them, but he felt the divide, the town splitting over him. The news played on, the anchor's voice cutting through. "Authorities say the suspect's claims of military rank are unverified." Marcus's fists clenched. Holt had turned his truth into a lie, and the world was buying it. He replayed the diner, the cook's nod, the knife's glint. Holt's allies were everywhere, and Marcus was running out of moves. His call to Ellis was his lifeline, but if the dispatcher had sabotaged it, he was alone. Lena and Aisha would see the news soon, their lives upended. Marcus's heart ached, but he pushed it down. He'd fought worse odds, survived ambushes, outlasted enemies. Holt was just another, but this fight was personal, systemic, a war on his existence. The cell's silence was deafening, broken only by distant chants. Marcus stood, pacing, his mind sharpening. He'd find a way, expose Holt, reclaim his name. But the news anchor's voice lingered, a poison spreading. How far would Holt's lies reach? Comment number 1 if you're outraged by this injustice. Hit like and subscribe to follow Marcus's fight, because the truth is under attack, and you won't believe what's coming. Can Marcus outsmart a system rigged against him, or will Holt's web crush him first? The courtroom smelled of polished wood and stale tension, its high ceiling doing little to ease the suffocating air around Marcus Caldwell. 3 days after the diner incident, he stood in chains, khaki trousers wrinkled, white shirt stained, with sweat, facing a judge whose cold eyes barely met his. The Georgia sun blazed through tall windows, casting harsh light on the packed gallery where whispers buzzed like flies. Marcus's wrists ached from the cuffs, but his posture remained. Unbroken, a 4-star general reduced to a defendant in a small-town circus. The charges? Assaulting an officer, carrying a concealed weapon, and fraud for his fake military rank, hung over him like a storm cloud. Officer Daniel Holt's planted knife, now Exhibit A, sat on the prosecutor's table, its blade catching the light like a taunt. Marcus's mind churned, replaying the interrogation, the sergeant's sneer, the news anchor's lies. His call to General Ellis had been blocked, his name dragged through the mud, and now this courtroom was Holt's next battlefield. The judge, a grey-haired man named Hargrove, shuffled papers, his face unreadable, but his reputation known. Whispers. In the station had pegged him as Holt's ally, a man who bent justice for the town's power players. Marcus's hope rested on Ellis, who'd promised a lawyer after their brief interrupted call. As the bail hearing began, the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Claire Benton, laid into Marcus with venom. This man attacked a decorated officer, carried an illegal weapon, and impersonated a military official, she said, her voice slicing through the room. He's a danger to our community. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he stayed silent, his 30 years of discipline holding firm. He'd faced worse odds, enemy fire, hostile boards. But this was different. This was home, where his stars meant nothing to a system that saw his skin first. The gallery stirred, some nodding at Benton's words, others shaking their heads. A young black woman in the back clutched a notebook, her eyes fierce, maybe a journalist, maybe an ally. Marcus's heart lifted slightly, but the weight of Holt's lies pressed harder. The courtroom doors swung open, and relief surged as Lena and Aisha, his wife and daughter, hurried in. Lena, 50, her braids pulled tight, wore the same strength she'd shown through his deployments. Aisha, 24, her eyes blazing with defiance, gripped her mother's hand. Their presence was a lifeline, but it came at a cost. As they took seats, a group of Holt's supporters, burly men in trucker hats, leaned forward, their slurs cutting through the air. "Go back where you came from," one hissed, loud enough for the gallery to hear, but not the judge. Lena's shoulders stiffened, but she kept her eyes on Marcus, her love a silent anchor. Aisha's fingers twitched, itching to respond, but Lena's grip held her back. Marcus's chest burned, rage mixing with guilt. His family shouldn't be here, enduring this. The bailiff called for order, but the damage was done, the room's divide clear. Holt sat in the front row, his smirk subtle but unmistakable, his uniform crisp, a hero in the town's eyes. Marcus's lawyer, sent by Ellis, finally arrived. A wiry man named Paul Kendrick, his suit slightly rumpled but his eyes sharp. Kendrick whispered to Marcus, "Ellis is working on Pentagon support, but Holt's got this town locked down. Stay strong." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. Kendrick was his shot, but Holt's influence was a shadow over everything. As the hearing continued, Kendrick argued for bail, presenting Marcus's impeccable record. 30 years of service, medals for valor, briefings with presidents. "General Caldwell is no threat," he said, holding up a certified copy of Marcus's military file, faxed from the Pentagon. "These charges are baseless, a misunderstanding at best." Benton scoffed, brandishing the knife. "This was found." At the defendant's seat, his prints are on it. Marcus's stomach twisted. His prints weren't on it. He'd never touched it. But Holt's allies had worked fast. The cook's nod in the diner flashed in his mind, the setup now a chain around his neck. Hargrove leaned forward, his voice gravelly. "I'm inclined to see the defendant as a risk, given the evidence." Kendrick pushed back, citing Marcus's rank and reputation, but Hargrove's eyes flicked to Holt, a silent agreement. Marcus's hope dimmed. This wasn't justice. It was theatre. Outside, the crowd had grown, their chants audible through the windows. "Free the general," clashed with "Lock him up." Aisha, unable to stay silent, pulled out her phone, filming the courtroom discreetly. She uploaded a video, her voice steady. "My father is a 4-star general, targeted for his skin. This is America's shame." The video hit the internet, racking up views in minutes, but Holt's allies were ready. Within hours, Aisha's personal details, her job, her address, were doxed, posted on hate-filled forums linked to Holt's network. Her phone buzzed with threats, each one a knife to Marcus's heart. He caught her eye, saw the fear she hid behind defiance, and vowed to end this. Kendrick demanded reasonable bail, but Benton countered, painting Marcus as a flight risk. "He's got resources, connections, he'll vanish." The lie was absurd, but Hargrove nodded, his gavel poised. Marcus braced himself, knowing what was coming. The judge's voice boomed, "Bail is set at $5 million, cash or bond." The gallery gasped, Lena's hand flying to her mouth. $5 million was impossible, a deliberate cage. Kendrick protested, but Hargrove slammed the gavel, ending the hearing. Marcus was led back to the holding cell, his family's faces blurring as the door closed. Holt's smirk followed him, a promise of more to come. In the cell, Marcus sat, his mind a storm. Aisha's video was a spark, but Holt's doxing had turned it against her. Lena would be next, he knew it. The knife, the charges, the bail, all pieces of Holt's game, each move tighter, crueler. Marcus thought of his first command, the soldiers who'd trusted him, the battles he'd won. This was no different, just uglier. He'd fight, not just for himself, but for Lena, Aisha, and every black man this town had crushed. The cell's walls felt closer, the air heavier, but Marcus's resolve hardened. Holt had the town, the judge, the media, but Marcus had his mind, his will, his truth. He'd called Ellis, and if that failed, he'd find another way. The news played faintly from a guard's radio, Aisha's video now viral. But Holt's lies were spreading faster. The crowd outside roared, divided, angry, a town on edge. Marcus stood, pacing, his heart pounding with purpose. He'd expose Holt, break his grip, reclaim his name. But Holt's allies were moving, and the next blow would be worse. The guard's radio crackled, a new report. "General imposter case escalates." Marcus's name was a headline, his life a spectacle. He closed his eyes, not in defeat, but in strategy. Holt had won this round, but the war was far from over. The county jail's air was thick with sweat and menace, the kind that clung to Marcus Caldwell's skin as he lay on a thin cot, the concrete wall cold against his back. 5 days since the diner, 4 since the courtroom's crushing bail, and now he was here, trapped in a 6x8 cell, his khaki trousers torn, white shirt smeared with grime. The $5 million bail was a deliberate shackle, ensuring he stayed caged while Officer Daniel Holt's lies spread like wildfire. Marcus's mind, honed by 30 years of military strategy, churned through every detail. The planted knife, the intercepted call to General Ellis, the doxing of his daughter Aisha. Holt's grip on this Georgia town was a vice, and Marcus was its target. The cell block echoed with shouts, clanging doors, and the low growl of men sizing each other up. Marcus kept his eyes sharp, his body tensed. He'd faced ambushes in war zones, but this was different. Here, the enemy wore no uniform, and the battlefield was a maze of steel and hate. The other inmates, a mix of petty thieves and hardened felons, watched him with predatory curiosity. Word had spread about the general in cell block C, thanks to the news blasting his face across every screen. Some smirked, others glared, their whispers laced with slurs. Marcus knew trouble was coming. He'd seen it in their eyes, the way they lingered near his cell. By noon, it arrived. 3 inmates, led by a hulking man named Rawls, cornered him in the rec yard, their tattoos screaming allegiance to a white supremacist gang. Rawls, his shaved head gleaming under the sun, spat at Marcus's feet. "Heard you're some big-shot soldier. Don't look like much to me." Marcus stood tall, his voice steady. "Walk away. I'm not your fight." Rawls laughed, cracking, his knuckles, his cronies circling. "Holt says you're trouble. We handle trouble." The name hit Marcus like a bullet. Holt's reach extended here, his allies pulling strings behind bars. The attack came fast. Rawls swung a fist, his cronies lunging with shivs crafted from sharpened plastic. Marcus's combat training kicked in, instincts forged in deserts and jungles. He dodged Rawls's punch, grabbed his arm and twisted, sending the giant crashing into a bench. One crony slashed at Marcus's side, grazing his ribs, but Marcus spun, landing a knee to the man's gut. The third hesitated, then charged, only to meet Marcus's elbow in a sickening crunch. Guards shouted, batons drawn, but they were slow. Too slow. Marcus stood over the fallen inmates, blood dripping from his side, his breath heavy but controlled. The yard fell silent, inmates staring, some with grudging respect, others with deeper hate. The guards hauled Marcus back to his cell, their grips bruising, their mutters venomous. One, a wiry man named Kessler, lingered at the door, his eyes cold. "You're making enemies, Caldwell. Keep this up. You won't last." Marcus met his gaze, unflinching. "Tell Holt I'm still here." Kessler's smirk confirmed it. This was Holt's doing, the inmates his pawns. Hours later, Kessler returned, tossing a disciplinary report through the bars. "You started that fight," he said, his voice flat. "Solitary for a week, and we're adding assault to your charges." Marcus's blood boiled, but he stayed silent, his mind racing. The frame job was evolving, each move tighter, crueler. Holt wasn't just content with jail. He wanted Marcus broken, erased. The cell door slammed and Marcus was alone again, the graze on his ribs stinging, a reminder of how close he'd come. He thought of Lena, his wife, and Aisha, his daughter, their faces anchoring him. A call from Lena earlier, brief and monitored, had brought news that shattered him. Their bank accounts were frozen, flagged by a local official tied to Holt. Their savings, built over decades, were gone. Their mortgage, now at risk. Aisha, fired from her marketing job after Holt's allies threatened her employer, was scrambling to fight back. Marcus's heart ached, guilt mixing with rage. His family was paying for his defiance, and Holt knew it. As night fell, the cell block's noise faded, replaced by the hum of a TV in the guard station. Aisha's viral video played, her voice fierce. "My father is a hero targeted for his skin." But the anchor's response was a knife. "New evidence suggests Caldwell's military claims are fraudulent." Marcus's fists clenched. Holt's lies were a virus, infecting everything. Then a new sound. Kessler's boots, back too soon. He slid a tray through the slot, his eyes glinting. "Eat up, General. Long night ahead." Marcus ignored the food, his instincts screaming. He'd heard whispers in the yard, inmates bragging about Holt's friends in high places, a network tied to a white supremacist group called the Sons of Liberty. The name sent a chill through him. Holt wasn't just a rogue cop. He was connected, dangerous, playing a game Marcus was only beginning to understand. Sleep was impossible, the cell's silence a trap. At 2 in the morning, the lights flickered, and footsteps echoed, too many, too deliberate. The door swung open, and 4 inmates not from the yard slipped in, their shivs gleaming. This wasn't a brawl, it was an execution. Marcus sprang up, his body screaming from the earlier fight. The first inmate lunged, aiming for his throat, but Marcus sidestepped, slamming the man's head into the wall. The second caught Marcus's arm, slicing deep, blood pooling fast. Pain seared, but Marcus fought, his training a lifeline. He disarmed the second, used the shiv to fend off the third, and knocked the fourth out with a desperate punch. The light snapped back on. Guards shouting, but Marcus stood bloodied alive, the attackers down. Kessler appeared, his face unreadable. Lucky night, Caldwell, won't happen again. Marcus collapsed, his vision blurring, the wound in his arm pulsing. He'd survived, but barely, and Holt's message was clear. No place was safe. As medics patched him up, Marcus's mind sharpened. The Sons of Liberty, the frozen accounts, Aisha's firing. It was all Holt, a web of hate with Marcus at its center. He'd fought for his country, bled for it, and now it was turning on him. But he wasn't done. Lena's voice echoed in his head, her strength his fuel. He'd expose Holt, protect his family, reclaim his name. The medics left, the cell locked, and Marcus sat, his wounds throbbing, his resolve iron. Holt's next move would be worse, but Marcus was ready. The TV played on, Aisha's video drowned by lies, the world watching a general fall. Comment number 1. If you're enraged by this system's betrayal, hit like and subscribe to see Marcus fight back, because the stakes are higher than ever. Will Marcus uncover Holt's true power, or will this prison trap be his end? The county jail's solitary cell was a tomb, its silence pressing against Marcus Caldwell's ears like a physical weight. 6 days since the diner, 5 since the courtroom, and now, bandaged from the near-fatal prison attack, he sat on a concrete slab, the stitches in his arm itching under torn khaki trousers. His white shirt, once crisp, hung in shreds, a mirror of his unraveling life. Officer Daniel Holt's web had tightened, the planted knife and false charges now dwarfed by a new low, drugs, slipped into his cell during a routine inspection. Marcus's mind, sharpened by 30 years of military strategy, pieced together the trap. The drugs, a baggie of white powder, were Holt's latest move, a felony charge to bury him deeper. The guard, Kessler, had smirked as he found it. His report already filed. Marcus's heart pounded, not from fear but from fury, the kind that had carried him through deserts and boardrooms as a 4-star general. Outside, the world was fracturing over him, Aisha's viral video a spark in a powder keg. The 24-year-old's plea, "My father is a hero, targeted for his skin," had exploded online, racking up millions of views. Hashtags like Justice for Caldwell trended, but Holt's allies, the Sons of Liberty, countered with venom. Doctored footage surfaced, showing Marcus attacking Holt in the diner, his hand edited to hold the knife he'd never touched. Social media erupted, half calling him a victim, half a fraud. Protests outside the jail turned chaotic, supporters clashing with Holt's mob, who waved signs screaming, "No imposters." Bottles flew, police sirens wailed, and Marcus, locked, in solitary, heard it all through the walls, a war over his name. Lena, his wife, called during a brief monitored moment, her voice trembling but fierce. "They're coming for us, Marcus. Our accounts are gone, and the bank says it's fraud. We're facing eviction." Her words cut deeper than the shiv from the night before. Aisha, fired and doxxed, was hiding with friends, her life upended. Marcus's guilt was a stone in his chest. His family was collateral damage in Holt's crusade, a racist vendetta dressed as justice. The Pentagon, his home for decades, was no help. A vague statement from General Ellis hit the news. "We're reviewing Caldwell's status. Colleagues." He'd fought beside. Men he'd saved turned their backs, fearing the scandal's stain. Marcus's legacy, built on sweat and sacrifice, was crumbling, and Holt knew it. In solitary, time blurred, the cell's dim light unchanging. Marcus paced 3 steps one way, 3 back, his mind a battlefield. The drugs were a death blow, a charge no judge would ignore, especially not Hargrove, Holt's puppet. Aisha's video had given him hope, but hope was a fragile thing here. The TV in the guard station, audible through the vent, played a new report. Caldwell's violent past uncovered, the anchor said, citing sources tied to Holt. Lies piled on lies, each one heavier, deadlier. Marcus thought of his first command, a black kid from Chicago proving himself to skeptical troops. He'd faced doubt, hate, but never this, a system weaponizing his identity against him. Lena's call echoed, her strength his anchor. He'd promised Aisha he'd come home. But Holt's plan was darker, whispered through the guard's chatter. "He won't make trial," one said, thinking Marcus couldn't hear. "Holt's got a way of disappearing problems. The words chilled him, not for himself, but for his family. Holt wasn't just after his freedom. He wanted his life, his legacy, erased. The protests outside grew louder, a riot brewing. Marcus caught fragments through the vent. Free the general against he's a liar. A window shattered somewhere, the crowd's rage spilling over. Holt's allies were stoking it, turning supporters against each other. A guard's radio crackled, reporting injuries, arrests. Marcus's name was a lightning rod, splitting the town, the nation. In solitary, he had no phone, no lawyer, no way to reach Ellis. Kendrick, his attorney, was fighting, but Holt's grip on the town was iron. Marcus's wounds throbbed, the more stitches pulling with every move, but Payne was an old friend. He'd survived ambushes, outsmarted enemies, and he'd survived this. The drugs, though, were a problem. If convicted, he'd face decades, his stars stripped, his family broken. Lena's voice rang in his head. "We're with you, always." He clung to it, his resolve hardening. The cell door creaked, and Kessler appeared, his eyes glinting with malice. "Found something in your cot, Caldwell. Powder, big trouble." Marcus stood, his voice steel. "You and Holt think you've won, you haven't." Kessler laughed, but his eyes flickered, a crack in his confidence. He left, the door slamming, and Marcus sat, his mind racing. The Sons of Liberty, Holt's network, were bigger than one cop, one town. They had money, power, reach. The frozen accounts, Aisha's firing, the doctored footage, it was all them, a machine grinding him down. But machines had weaknesses, and Marcus was trained to find them. He thought of Aisha, her courage, her video a beacon in the dark. It had lit a fire, but Holt was dousing it with lies. The protests were proof. People believed in him, but belief wasn't enough. He needed evidence, a way to expose Holt's web. The TV played on, the anchor's voice a dagger. Caldwell's drug charges raised questions about his character. Marcus's fists clenched, his stitches straining. He'd fought for this country, bled for it, and now it was betraying him. But he wasn't alone. Lena was out there. Aisha was fighting. And somewhere, Ellis might still be an ally. The riots. Outside roared a town on the brink. Marcus stood, his wounds screaming, his heart steady. Holt's plan to disappear him was coming, but Marcus was ready. He'd faced death before, stared it down, and won. This was no different, just uglier. The cell's walls closed in, the air heavy, but Marcus's mind was clear. He'd break Holt's game, protect his family, reclaim his truth. The guard's radio buzzed, a new report. Caldwell's supporters clash with police. The world was watching, but Holt was moving faster, his next blow already in motion. The solitary cell's darkness was a living thing, wrapping Marcus Caldwell in its suffocating grip as he crouched by the door, listening. 7 days since the diner, 6 since the courtroom, and now, bloodied from the prison attack and framed. For drugs, he knew Officer Daniel Holt's plan to disappear him was closing in. The Georgia jail's walls, slick with damp, echoed with distant shouts. But Marcus's focus was razor-sharp, honed by 30 years as a 4-star general. His khaki trousers, torn and blood-stained, clung to his legs, his white shirt a tattered rag, but his mind was a weapon, plotting survival. The guard's whisper from hours ago, "Holt's got a way of disappearing problems," wasn't idle talk. Marcus had overheard Kessler, the corrupt guard, mention a transfer tonight. A special one with no paperwork. It was a death sentence, a quiet ride to nowhere. Lena, his wife, and Aisha, his daughter, were out there, fighting eviction and threats, their lives unraveling because of him. Marcus's heart burned, guilt and resolve fusing into action. He had to escape, warn them, expose Holt's Sons of Liberty. The cell door's lock clicked, and Kessler appeared, his flashlight blinding. "Transfer time, Caldwell." Marcus stood feigning weakness, his stitches throbbing from the shiv wound. 2 more guards flanked Kessler, their hands on batons, eyes hard. Marcus's training kicked in, every detail a map. The guards' stances, the hallway's layout, the van waiting outside. As they cuffed him, he tested their grip, sloppy, overconfident. The hallway was dim, the jail quiet, most inmates asleep. Marcus's pulse raced, but his face stayed blank, a soldier's mask. They led him to a side exit, where a black van idled, its driver a shadow. No cameras, no witnesses. Holt's handiwork. As Kessler opened the van's door, Marcus moved, lightning fast. He twisted, slamming his elbow into Kessler's jaw, dropping him. The second guard swung his baton, but Marcus ducked, grabbing the man's arm and flipping him into the third. The driver lunged, a knife flashing, but Marcus sidestepped, his cuffs a hindrance but not a barrier. A sharp pain tore through his shoulder, a gunshot from Kessler now staggering to his feet. Marcus gritted his teeth, adrenaline surging, and tackled the driver, knocking him out. The keys jangled in the ignition. Marcus ripped them free, uncuffed himself with a guard's keys, and sprinted into the night, blood soaking his shirt. The Georgia woods loomed dense and dark, a maze of pine and shadow. Sirens wailed behind him, the jail's alarm piercing the humid air. Marcus ran, his shoulder screaming, each step a gamble. His combat training guided him. Stay low, move unpredictably, use the terrain. He wove through trees, the underbrush, clawing his legs, his breath ragged but steady. Holt's men would be coming, not just guards but the Sons of Liberty, their vigilantes itching to hunt. Marcus's only hope was Aisha, now underground after her doxing. He'd memorized her burner phone number, a lifeline if he could find a phone. The woods thinned, revealing a gas station, its neon sign flickering. Marcus stumbled inside, the clerk, a teenager, freezing at his bloodied appearance. "Phone!" Marcus gasped, his voice commanding despite the pain. The clerk handed over a cell, hands shaking. Marcus dialed Aisha, praying she'd answer. "Dad?" Her voice, tense but alive, was a jolt of hope. "I'm out but hurt. Holt's men are coming. Stay hidden." Aisha's reply was cut off by static, the call dropping. Marcus cursed, his vision blurring. The clerk stared, wide-eyed, as Marcus staggered out, the phone useless now. The sirens were closer, dogs barking in the distance. Holt's reach was endless, his allies everywhere. Marcus pushed deeper into the woods, his shoulder pulsing, blood loss sapping his strength. He thought of Lena, facing eviction, her courage his anchor. The Pentagon's betrayal stung worse, Ellis's vague statement, his colleague's silence. A news report from the jail's TV flashed in his mind. Caldwell escapes, confirming guilt. Holt's sons had spun his breakout as proof, rallying vigilantes to bring him down. The public, already divided, swallowed the lie. Aisha's video drowned by doctored clips. Marcus's name, his 30-year legacy, was ash, but he wasn't done. He'd fought for this country, bled for it, and he'd fight now. The woods grew denser, his steps faltering. A stream glinted ahead, its water cold against his fevered skin as he waded through, masking his scent. But the dogs were relentless, their howls closing in. Marcus's vision swam, his shoulder afire that spread to his chest. He leaned against a tree, gasping, his body betraying him. Lena's face, Aisha's voice. They kept him moving, one step, then another. The vigilantes, shouts echoed, flashlights cutting through the dark. Marcus's training screamed to keep going, but his legs buckled, the ground rushing up. He collapsed, blood pooling beneath him, the world fading. His last thought was of Aisha, her burner number, her fight. He'd escaped Holt's trap, but at what cost? The sirens screamed closer now, Holt's men tasting victory. Marcus's hand clutched the dirt, his will unbroken even as his body failed. He'd survived wars, outsmarted enemies, but this was different. A war on his existence, his family, his truth. The dogs were near, their barks a death knell, but Marcus's heart still beat, defiant, refusing to quit. Comment number 1, if. You're rooting for Marcus to survive this manhunt. Hit like and subscribe to see his next move, because the odds are stacked against him. Can Marcus find sanctuary before Holt's vigilantes close in, or will his escape end in tragedy? The Georgia woods were a black void, swallowing Marcus Caldwell's fading breaths as he lay bleeding. His shoulder wound a pulsing agony. 8 days since the diner, 7 since the courtroom, his escape from Holt's deadly transfer had pushed him to the brink. His torn khaki trousers and shredded white shirt clung to his sweat-soaked skin, the dirt beneath him cold as death. Officer Daniel Holt's vigilantes closed in, their dogs howling, flashlights slashing through the pines. Marcus's 30-year military career, his 4-star general stars meant nothing now. Holt's Sons of Liberty had branded him a fugitive, a fraud, and the nation watched, divided. His vision blurred, Lena's face and Aisha's voice his, only anchors when footsteps crunched nearby, not heavy like the vigilantes, but cautious, deliberate. A figure emerged, a black man in his 40s, grizzled, with a soldier's bearing. "General Caldwell?" he whispered, kneeling. Marcus nodded, barely conscious. "Name's Isaiah, ex-Marine. You're with friends now." Isaiah slung Marcus's arm over his shoulder, half carrying him through the woods, away from the barking dogs. A hidden truck waited, its engine low, and Isaiah eased Marcus inside, a woman at the wheel speeding off before the vigilantes could catch up. The truck rattled down back roads, Marcus's head lolling, pain searing with every bump. Isaiah pressed a cloth to his shoulder, blood soaking through. "You're safe with us," he said. "We're the Liberty Network, fighting scum like Holt." Marcus's mind, foggy but sharp, latched onto the words. An underground resistance, allies in this war. The truck stopped at a farmhouse, its windows dark, hidden by oaks. Inside, a makeshift clinic buzzed with quiet urgency. A nurse, her hands, steady, stitched Marcus's shoulder, antibiotics burning through his veins. Isaiah explained. The Liberty Network, a coalition of veterans and activists, had tracked Marcus since Aisha's video went viral. "Your daughter's a firebrand," he said. "She's with us, hacking Holt systems, exposing his Sons of Liberty." Marcus's heart leapt. Aisha was alive, fighting, but dread followed. Lena, his wife, wasn't mentioned. Isaiah's face darkened. "Lena was attacked last night outside your home. She's in the hospital, stable but guarded. Holt's men did it." Marcus's fists clenched, stitches straining, rage swallowing pain. His family was paying for his defiance, Holt's cruelty boundless. The farmhouse hummed with activity, laptops glowing, radios crackling. Aisha, hidden in another safe house, had cracked Holt's encrypted emails, revealing the Sons' plan to rig Marcus's trial with a tainted jury. Names, dates, bribes, it was damning. But Holt's network was vast, tied to local officials, even state police. Marcus, propped on a cot, forced himself to focus, his general's mind mapping the enemy. "We need to leak this," he said, voice hoarse. "Get it to the press, the Pentagon." Isaiah nodded, but a young activist, Maya, burst in, her face pale. "They hit our main safe house, burned it. Holt's men are hunting us." Marcus's gut twisted. Holt wasn't just chasing him. He was dismantling resistance piece by piece. The farmhouse's lights flickered, a warning. Isaiah barked orders, activists grabbing gear, preparing to move. Marcus stood, wobbly but defiant, his shoulder a dull throb. "I'm not hiding," he said. "Holt wants me. I'll face him." Isaiah gripped his arm. "Not yet, General. We need you alive." The group fled, Marcus in a van with Maya and Isaiah, the farmhouse fading into the night. They reached a new hideout, a warehouse in a ghost town, its rusted walls a fortress. Aisha's hacked data glowed on a laptop, proof of Holt's jury tampering, his Sons' funding from shadowy donors. Marcus memorized it, his mind a steel trap. Aisha's voice came through a secure line, trembling but fierce. "Dad, I'm safe, but Holt's closing in. I got more. His group's planning something big." Before Marcus could respond, the line cut, static his only answer. His heart stopped. Isaiah's radio buzzed, a panicked voice. "They've got Aisha. Holt's men ambushed her safe house." Marcus's world tilted, rage and fear colliding. Holt had his daughter, a move so brutal it shook even Isaiah. "They're demanding you surrender," Isaiah said, his voice low, "or she's dead." Marcus's stitches burned, his shoulder. Useless, but his eyes blazed. 30 years of war had taught him one thing: never let the enemy dictate terms. He'd lost men, buried friends, but Aisha was his line in the sand. The warehouse's air grew heavy, activists whispering, fear spreading. Maya, her hands shaking, pulled up a map. "They're holding her at an old mill 10 miles out. It's a trap." Marcus nodded, his mind racing. A trap, yes, but Holt had underestimated him. The Liberty Network was small, outnumbered, but they had grit, and Marcus had strategy. He'd trained for this, planned assaults with less. Lena, in the hospital, needed him. Aisha, in Holt's hands, demanded him. The Pentagon's silence, the nation's division, Holt's lies, they fueled him. His escape had been a spark, but this was war. Isaiah handed him a vest, a pistol, his eyes steady. "We're with you, General." Marcus took the gear, his wounds screaming, his heart iron. Holt's sons thought they'd won, burning safe houses, snatching Aisha. They were wrong. Marcus had survived deserts, jungles, ambushes. He'd survive this, save his daughter, break Holt's empire. The warehouse's lights dimmed, the group moving out. Marcus at the lead, his steps steady despite the pain. The mill loomed in his mind, a battlefield waiting. Holt's taunt from the diner echoed, "This town's mine." Not anymore. Marcus's resolve was a fire, burning through doubt, fear, pain. He'd get Aisha, expose the sons, reclaim his name. The van roared into the night, the team silent, ready. Holt's trap was set, but Marcus was coming and hell was with him. The news played faintly on a radio, Aisha's video buried under lies. Fugitive Caldwell sparks riots. The world watched, but Marcus fought, his family, his cause, his truth, his weapon. The Georgia night was a shroud, heavy with humidity and dread. As Marcus Caldwell stood at the edge of a clearing, the old mill's rusted silhouette looming 10 miles from the Liberty Network's warehouse. 9 days since the diner. 8 since. The courtroom, and now his daughter Aisha was Holt's hostage, a pawn in Officer Daniel Holt's ruthless game. Marcus's shoulder throbbed, stitches pulling under his bloodied khaki trousers and tattered white shirt, but his 30-year military resolve burned hotter than the pain. The Sons of Liberty, Holt's white supremacist network, had demanded his surrender for Aisha's life, a trap Marcus knew too well. Isaiah, the ex-Marine, stood beside him, his face grim. The Liberty Network's small team hidden in the trees, their radios silent. Marcus's general's mind mapped the terrain. The mill's single entrance, the open field, the perfect ambush. Sight. Holt's men were inside, Aisha with them, her hacking of their systems the spark that lit this fire. Lena, his wife, lay in a hospital, attacked by Holt's thugs, her strength his anchor. The Pentagon's silence, the nation's division over his name, fueled his fight. He'd escaped jail, survived a manhunt, and now faced Holt's endgame. Isaiah gripped his shoulder. "It's a setup, General. They won't let her go." Marcus nodded, his voice steel. "I know, but I'm getting her out." He stepped into the clearing, hands raised, the network's rifles trained on the mill. A floodlight snapped on, blinding him, and Holt's voice boomed from a speaker. "Caldwell. You're late. Drop the vest, the gun, now." Marcus complied, the pistol and vest hitting the dirt, his wounds screaming. Holt emerged, flanked by 6 sons, their rifles gleaming. Aisha stood between them, hands bound, her eyes fierce despite the bruise on her cheek. Marcus's heart twisted, rage swallowing fear. "Let her go, Holt," he called, his voice carrying across the field. "You've got me." Holt's smirk was a blade, his uniform crisp, a mockery of authority. "You think you're in charge? You're nothing." The sons laughed, but Aisha's gaze locked on Marcus, a silent signal. She was ready. Marcus took a step, his mind racing. 30 years of war had taught him to read enemies, and Holt's confidence was a tell, too cocky, too exposed. The negotiation was a farce, but Marcus played it, buying time. "Release her and I'll confess to everything. The knife, the drugs, all of it." Holt's eyes narrowed, greed flashing. A public confession would seal Marcus's ruin, Holt's victory, but the officer shook his head. "No deal. You both end tonight." The sons raised their rifles, and Marcus moved, faster than his wounds should allow. He dove for Aisha, tackling her behind a rusted barrel as gunfire erupted. The Liberty Network fired back, their shots precise, dropping 2 sons. Marcus shielded Aisha, his shoulder tearing open, blood soaking the ground. Holt charged, his baton swinging, and Marcus met him, landing a fist to Holt's jaw, the crack echoing. Holt staggered, but his men closed in, overwhelming Marcus with blows. Aisha screamed, kicking a son's knee, giving Marcus a second to breathe. Isaiah's team pushed forward, their gunfire pinning the Sons, but Holt's men were trained, relentless. Marcus fought, his body failing, his will iron. He grabbed a fallen rifle, firing to cover Aisha's scramble to the trees. But Holt's men were too many, their ambush planned to perfection. A net of ropes dropped from the mill's roof, tangling Marcus, the Sons pouncing. He roared, tearing at the cords, but a rifle butt slammed his skull, stars exploding. Aisha was dragged back, her cries cutting through the chaos. Holt stood over Marcus, his face bloodied but triumphant. "You lose, General." The network retreated, outgunned, their radios crackling with despair. Marcus, bound and beaten, was thrown into a van, Aisha beside him, her eyes blazing defiance. The mill faded, the Sons cheering, Holt's victory complete, but a flicker of hope sparked. Isaiah's team had recorded the ambush, Maya's camera catching every second. By dawn, the footage hit the internet. Aisha's hacked data attached, Holt's jury tampering, his son's funding, his brutality. The video went viral, millions watching Holt's men fire on an unarmed general and his daughter. Protests swelled, justice for Caldwell trending globally. Holt's superiors, cornered by the outcry, suspended him, but his sons vowed revenge, their forums buzzing with threats. Lena, recovering in the hospital, saw the footage, rallying supporters from her bed, her voice a beacon. Marcus, back in a cell, his wounds untreated, clung to the news filtering through a guard's radio. Public demands Caldwell's release. The Liberty Network's broadcast had shifted the tide, but Holt's men tightened their grip, the jail a fortress. Marcus sat, blood crusted on his face, Aisha in a separate cell, her safety his only thought. The ambush had crushed his escape, but the world was watching, and Holt's mask was slipping. Marcus's 30-year career, his stars, his truth were battered but alive. He'd fought wars, outsmarted enemies, and he'd fight now. Lena's strength, Aisha's courage, the network's grit, they were his army. The cell's walls closed in, but Marcus's resolve grew, a fire no cage could douse. Holt's suspension was a crack in his empire, and Marcus would pry it open. The radio buzzed, a new report. Caldwell case heads to new trial. Public pressure had forced it, but Holt's sons were plotting, their next move darker, deadlier. Marcus stood, his body broken, his spirit unbroken, ready for the war ahead. Comment number 1 if you believe Marcus deserves justice. Hit like and subscribe to see this fight unfold, because the truth is rising and Holt's empire is cracking. Will the new trial free Marcus, or will Holt's sons strike back harder than ever? The courtroom's air was electric, charged with anticipation and dread, as Marcus Caldwell stood before Judge Evelyn Torres, his wrists free of cuffs for the first time in weeks. 10 days since the diner, 9 since his first courtroom defeat, and now in a new trial forced by public outcry, he faced a jury that held his fate. His khaki trousers were replaced with a borrowed suit, his white shirt long gone, but the stitches in his shoulder and the bruises from Holt's ambush throbbed beneath, a reminder of the war he'd fought to stand here. Officer Daniel Holt, suspended but unbowed, sat in the gallery, his Sons of Liberty allies scattered among the crowd, their eyes like daggers. Marcus's 30-year career as a 4-star general, his stars earned through blood and brilliance, hung in the balance, his name a lightning rod splitting the nation. The Liberty Network's viral video of Holt's mill ambush, coupled with Aisha's hacked data, had exposed the Sons' jury tampering, forcing this trial. Lena, his wife, sat in the front row, her hospital bandages hidden under a blazer, her strength a beacon. Aisha, freed from Holt's grasp, gripped her mother's hand, her eyes fierce, her hacking still fueling the fight. Paul Kendrick, Marcus's lawyer, stood ready, his rumpled suit belying a razor-sharp mind. The courtroom buzzed, reporters scribbling, cameras rolling, the world watching. Judge Torres, a stern woman with a reputation for fairness, called order, her gavel a sharp crack. Kendrick opened, his voice steady, dismantling Holt's lies. General Caldwell is a hero, targeted for his race, framed with a knife he never touched, drugs he never owned. He presented Aisha's evidence, emails proving Holt's sons bribed jurors in the first trial, bank records tying them to local officials. The gallery gasped as Kendrick held up the diner's knife, now traced to the cook, a Sons member. "This was planted," he said, "and we have the receipts." The prosecutor, a new face named Victor Lang, countered with venom, painting Marcus as a violent fugitive. "He attacked Officer Holt, escaped custody, incited riots," Lang said, his words dripping with bias. Holt's allies in the gallery nodded, their whispers poisoning the air. Marcus's jaw tightened, his general's discipline holding him still. He'd faced enemy fire, outsmarted warlords, but this was a different battlefield, where truth fought lies in a rigged arena. Kendrick called witnesses, the diner's young patron, who'd filmed Holt's slap, now trembling as she testified. "He hit the general for no reason," she said, her voice shaking. But Lang cross-examined brutally, hinting at her criminal ties, a lie fed by Holt's network. The next witness, a Liberty Network activist, confirmed the knife's origin. But a Sons thug stared him down from the gallery, his family's address already leaked online. Fear silenced others, Holt's intimidation a shadow over the trial. Marcus caught Aisha's eye, her nod a spark of hope. She'd hacked deeper, finding texts between Holt and the cook, proof of the frame job. Kendrick submitted it, the jury leaning forward, but Lang scoffed, claiming the texts were fabricated. The courtroom's divide deepened, half the jury nodding at Kendrick, half glaring at Marcus, their biases clear. Holt's men had reached them, Marcus knew, their bribes subtle but effective. Outside, protests roared, justice for Caldwell clashing with Holt's mob, police barely holding the line. Lena's testimony came next, her voice steady despite her injuries. "My husband served this country for 30 years, and this town tried to erase him." The jury softened, but a juror, a middle-aged man with shifty eyes, scribbled notes, his face too calm. Marcus's gut screamed he was Holt's plant, a holdover from the tainted pool. The trial stretched into days, each one a gauntlet. Kendrick exposed the drug charge as a setup, Kessler's personnel file showing Sons ties. But Lang countered with a bombshell, leaked Pentagon files, Marcus's classified cyber missions splashed across hostile media. Caldwell endangered. "National security," Lang said, the lies twisting Marcus's service into treason. The gallery erupted, reporters rushing out, the nation reeling. Marcus's heart sank. Holt's Sons had hacked the Pentagon, a move so bold it shook him. His missions, once secret, now fueled headlines, "General or traitor?" Lena gripped Aisha's hand, their faces pale but defiant. Kendrick fought back, proving the leaks came from Sons servers, but the damage was done. The jury's eyes hardened, doubt creeping in. Marcus stood, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I've served honorably. Those leaks are Holt's doing, not mine." Torres silenced him, but his words landed, a few jurors nodding. The shifty juror, though, whispered to another, his influence spreading. Closing arguments came, Kendrick's passion clashing with Lang's venom. The jury deliberated, hours stretching into agony. Marcus sat, his suit tight, his wounds a dull ache. Lena and Aisha watched, their love his anchor. Holt, in the gallery, smirked, his Sons ready for any outcome. The jury returned, the foreman's voice steady, not guilty on all charges. The courtroom exploded, Lena sobbing, Aisha cheering, reporters scrambling. Marcus exhaled, relief flooding him, his stars restored. But the shifty juror stood, his face smug. "I was pressured," he said, pointing at Kendrick. "This trial's tainted?" Gasps filled the room, Torres's gavel pounding. A mistrial loomed, Holt's final card played. Marcus's acquittal, his moment of triumph, teetered on collapse. The Sons in the gallery grinned, their plan unfolding. Lena's eyes met Marcus's, her strength unyielding. Aisha's fingers twitched, ready to hack again. Kendrick whispered, "We'll fight this." Marcus nodded, his resolve iron. Holt had struck, but the war wasn't over. The courtroom cleared, protests raging outside, the nation divided. Marcus stood free but not safe, his truth battered but alive. Holt's sons were moving, their next blow already forming, and Marcus was ready. The Virginia air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of autumn leaves, but for Marcus Caldwell it held only the weight of betrayal and danger. 11 days since the diner, 10 since his first courtroom battle, and now, freshly acquitted in a second trial, he stood outside a safe house, his borrowed suit replaced with civilian jeans and a jacket, hiding the scars and stitches from Holt's relentless war. The courtroom victory, hard won with Aisha's hacked evidence and public pressure, had freed him, but Officer Daniel Holt's Sons of Liberty had struck back, their vengeance a fire consuming everything Marcus held dear. His 30-year career, as a 4-star general, his stars polished through sacrifice, was now a target, his name a battlefield. Lena, his wife, and Aisha, his daughter, stood beside him, their faces etched with exhaustion but unyielding strength. The safe house, a modest cabin tucked in the Blue Ridge Mountains, was meant to be a refuge, arranged by the Liberty Network after the trial's mistrial threat. But safety was a lie Holt wouldn't allow. Hours after the verdict, as Marcus reunited with his family in a fleeting moment of hope, a bomb had ripped through their Georgia home, reducing decades of memories to ash. The explosion, claimed by an anonymous patriot group, bore the sons' fingerprints, their forums buzzing with glee. Marcus's heart had shattered, not for the house, but for Lena's tears, Aisha's clenched fists, the life they'd built. Now rubble. The Pentagon, his home for decades, offered no shield. General Ellis, once an ally, had reinstated Marcus's rank, but sidelined him, citing controversy in a cold memo. Colleagues who'd saluted him now avoided his calls, their silence louder than Holt's lies. Marcus stood on the cabin's porch, the mountain air doing little to cool his rage. Lena, her hospital wounds barely healed, packed supplies inside, her resilience a quiet fire. Aisha, her laptop glowing, scoured the dark web, her hacks exposing. More sons' plans, attacks on Marcus's allies, smear campaigns worse. The trial had cracked Holt's empire, but he was a wounded beast, more dangerous now, his militia growing. Marcus's acquittal, meant to be a triumph, was a spark to Holt's fury. The safe house's peace shattered at dusk, a distant rumble breaking the silence. Marcus's instincts, honed in war zones, screamed danger. He ushered Lena and Aisha inside, grabbing a pistol from Isaiah, the Liberty Network's ex-Marine, who'd joined them for protection. Headlights pierced the trees, a convoy of trucks roaring up the dirt road. Marcus's gut twisted. Holt's militia, not police, their Sons of Liberty patches glinting under moonlight. Isaiah radioed the network, but backup was miles away. Marcus, Lena, Aisha, and Isaiah barricaded the cabin, their breaths sharp, the air thick with dread. The truck stopped, men spilling out, their rifles raised, voices chanting slurs. Holt wasn't among them, his suspension forcing him underground, but his orders were clear. A megaphone crackled, a militia leader barking, "Mo Caldwell, come out or we burn it down." Marcus's mind raced, mapping exits, weaknesses. The cabin was a trap, its wooden walls no match for fire or bullets. Lena gripped his hand, her eyes steady. "We fight, Marcus." Aisha nodded, her laptop streaming the attack live, a desperate plea to the world. Marcus kissed them both, his heart a furnace of love and fury, and took position by a window, Isaiah at another. The militia opened, fire bullets shredding wood, glass exploding. Marcus returned shots precise, dropping 2 men, but the sons were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. Isaiah's rifle jammed, a curse escaping as he dove for cover. Lena, untrained but fierce, fired a shotgun, her aim wild but enough to stall the advance. Aisha's stream hit millions, comments flooding, "Save the general." But the world's outrage was distant, useless against the gunfire. Marcus's shoulder, still stitched, burned with every move, but he fought, his general's mind ablade. He spotted a fuel can in the militia's truck, an idea forming. He signaled Isaiah, who nodded, slipping out a back window to flank. Marcus covered him, drawing fire, his shot surgical despite the pain. Isaiah reached the truck, smashing the can, gasoline pooling. A match flared, and the truck erupted, flames scattering the suns, their screams piercing the night. The distraction gave Marcus time, but the militia regrouped. Their rage doubled. A grenade arced through the air, blasting the cabin's porch, fire licking the walls. Marcus pulled Lena and Aisha toward the back, their escape narrowing. Isaiah returned, bloodied but alive, and they ran, the forest their only hope. The network's van, hidden nearby, was their target, but the sons pursued, their dogs barking, flashlights slashing. Marcus carried Lena, her leg wounded by shrapnel, her breath ragged but her will iron. Aisha ran ahead, guiding them, her laptop left behind but its stream still live. The van loomed, but the sons were faster, their bullets grazing trees. Marcus's vision blurred, exhaustion clawing, but Lena's weight in his arms kept him moving. They reached the van, Isaiah at the wheel, and sped off, the militia's trucks roaring behind. The chase was chaos, bullets pinging metal, the van swerving. On mountain roads, Lena slumped, blood soaking her leg, her face pale. Marcus pressed his jacket to her wound, his voice steady despite the panic. "Stay with me, Lena." Aisha radioed the network, her voice breaking. "We need help now." The militia's trucks gained, a rocket launcher glinting in one. Marcus braced, his mind flashing to his first command, the soldiers he'd led through hell. This was his family, his war, and he'd lose everything before giving up. The van hit a curve, tires screeching, and a network helicopter appeared, its spotlight blinding the suns. Gunfire from above scattered the militia, their trucks crashing, but not before a final shot hit the van's tire. Isaiah swerved, the van skidding into a ditch, Lena crying out. Marcus shielded her, his body a wall, as the chopper landed, network fighters rushing to secure them. Lena was airlifted, her pulse weak, Marcus and Aisha beside her, the militia retreating but not defeated. Holt's sons framed the attack on Marcus, claiming he'd bombed his own home, their lies hitting news feeds. Caldwell's terrorist ties. The world wavered, some believing, others rallying. Marcus, in the chopper, held Lena's hand, his stars dimmed, but his fight alive. Holt's militia was bloodied, but their leader was free, plotting. The hospital loomed, Lena's life, the new battle, and Marcus's resolve, a fire no ambush could quench. The Georgia night pulsed with danger, the abandoned mill's rusted skeleton casting jagged shadows as Marcus Caldwell crept through the underbrush, his body screaming from wounds old and new. 12 days since the diner, 11 since the courtroom, and now, with Lena fighting for her life in a hospital after Holt's militia ambush, Marcus hunted Officer Daniel Holt to save his daughter Aisha. His jeans were soaked with blood, his jacket torn, the stitches in his shoulder ripping with every move, but his 30-year military resolve, forged as a 4-star general, burned brighter than pain. The Sons of Liberty, Holt's white supremacist network, held Aisha hostage in the mill, their trap set after burning Marcus's safe house and bombing his home. Isaiah, the Liberty Network's ex-Marine, flanked him, their small team of activists, spread thin, radios silent to avoid detection. Marcus's mind, a general's battlefield, mapped the mill, one main entrance, crumbling walls, a maze of old machinery. Holt's men, maybe a dozen, were inside, their rifles ready, Aisha's life, their leverage. Lena's pale face, her bloodied leg from the convoy attack, haunted Marcus. But Aisha's courage, her hacks exposing Holt's empire, drove him forward. The Pentagon's betrayal, the nation's division, Holt's lies, they were noise, drowned by his mission. He signaled Isaiah, his voice a whisper. "Cover the east, I'm going in." Isaiah nodded, his eyes steady, and slipped into the dark, rifle raised. Marcus crouched, moving like a ghost, his pistol heavy in his hand. The mill's door hung ajar, a faint light spilling out, voices echoing inside. Holt's drawl cut through, cold and mocking. "Your daddy's coming, girl, won't help you." Aisha's reply, defiant, sent a jolt through Marcus. "He'll bury you." His heart swelled, rage and love colliding. He slipped inside, the air thick with rust and oil, his boots silent on cracked concrete. Shadows moved ahead, suns patrolling. their chatter laced with slurs. Marcus's training took over, 30 years of stealth and strategy guiding him. He ducked behind a rusted conveyor, spotting Aisha tied to a chair in the mill's center, Holt pacing nearby, his pistol gleaming. 4 sons guarded her, 2 more at the perimeter, their radios crackling. Marcus counted 8 total, fewer than expected, but enough to kill. Holt's face, bruised from their last fight, twisted with hate as he grabbed Aisha's chin. "Your general's done. This town, this country, it's ours." Aisha spat, her eyes blazing, and Marcus's grip tightened, his wound pulsing. He needed a diversion, a way to thin the herd. A stack of oil drums loomed nearby, their caps loose. Marcus crept closer, unscrewing one, the stench of fuel sharp. He tipped it, liquid pooling, and struck a scavenged lighter, the spark catching. Flames roared, the sons shouting, 2 rushing to the fire. Marcus moved silent, dropping one with a chokehold, disarming another with a swift strike. Their radios fell silent, but Holt spun, sensing trouble. "Spread out!" he barked, his eyes scanning the dark. Marcus reached Aisha, cutting her ropes. With a scavenged knife, her whisper fierce, "Dad, they've got snipers upstairs." He nodded, pulling her behind a machine, his shoulder tearing, blood dripping. Isaiah's rifle cracked outside, dropping a sniper, the network tightening. The noose. But Holt was no fool. His sons regrouping, their gunfire pinning Isaiah's team. Marcus handed Aisha a pistol, her hands steady despite the fear. "Stay low," he said, and charged, drawing Holt's fire. The mill became a war zone. Bullets, ricocheting, metal screaming. Marcus flanked a son, snapping his neck, but another caught him, a fist slamming his wounded shoulder. Pain blinded him, but he fought, his general's will a steel core. Aisha fired, covering him, her aim shaky but enough. Holt roared, his pistol raised, and shot, the bullet grazing Marcus's side, blood soaking his jacket. Marcus staggered, but lunged, tackling Holt, their bodies crashing into rusted gears. Holt's gun skidded away and Marcus pinned him, his fist slamming Holt's jaw, blood spraying. "Hey, you're done," Marcus growled, but Holt laughed, his eyes wild. "You'll never win." A son charged, and Marcus rolled, taking the blow, his vision swimming. Aisha screamed, shooting the son, but more closed in. Isaiah's team breached. The mill, their gunfire scattering the sons, activists fighting with desperate grit. Marcus freed Aisha, shoving her toward Isaiah, who pulled her to safety. But Holt broke free, grabbing a fallen rifle and fired, the bullet tearing through Marcus's chest. He collapsed, blood pooling, his breath shallow. The mill spun, Aisha's cries distant, but Marcus's mind held firm. Lena's face, Aisha's voice, his anchors. Isaiah's team overwhelmed the sons. Their leaders shot a fatal mistake. The surviving sons fled, Holt vanishing into the chaos, his scream echoing, "This isn't over." The network secured the mill, Aisha sobbing over Marcus, her hands pressing his wound. Isaiah radioed for medics, the chopper's roar nearing. Marcus's eyes fluttered, his voice weak. "Get Holt. Protect Lena." Aisha nodded, tears falling, as medics lifted him, the mill fading. Lena's testimony, broadcast from her hospital bed, hit the airwaves hours later, her voice a thunderclap. "My husband fought for truth. Stop the sons." Congress listened. Arrests began, Holt's network cracking under pressure. The nation watched, protests swelling, justice for Caldwell a global cry. Marcus, airlifted to a hospital, clung to life, his stars battered but shining. Holt's escape was a shadow, his vow to destroy Marcus's legacy a lingering threat. The network regrouped, Aisha leading, her hacks now a weapon. Marcus's chest burned, his life hanging by a thread, but his fight lived in his family, his allies, his truth. The mill's ruins smoldered, a battlefield won but a war unfinished. Holt's sons were wounded, but their leader roamed free, plotting. Marcus's heart beat, faint but defiant, his general's will unbroken, ready for the final stand. The hospital room was a sterile cocoon, its beeping monitors a lifeline tethering Marcus Caldwell to the world. 13 days since the diner, 12 since the courtroom, and now, his chest bandaged from Holt's bullet in the mill, he lay in A Virginia medical center, the weight of his 30-year military career pressing against his fragile recovery. His jeans and jacket were gone, replaced by a hospital gown, but his four-star general's resolve, forged through decades of sacrifice, burned beneath the pain. Officer Daniel Holt, though vanished, cast a long shadow, his Sons of Liberty wounded, but not broken. Lena, his wife, sat by his side, her leg wound healing, her eyes a mix of relief and steel. Aisha, his daughter, stood at the window, her laptop humming, her hack still dismantling Holt's empire. The Mills battle had freed Aisha, crippled the sons, but Holt's escape and his vow to destroy Marcus's legacy lingered like poison. Marcus's chest ached with every breath, the bullet's path a hair's breadth from his heart. But his mind was clear, mapping the war's endgame. The Liberty Network's footage of the mill, Aisha's data, and Lena's televised plea had shifted the tide, forcing Congress to act. Arrests swept Georgia, Sons leaders cuffed, their funding traced to dark money. Marcus, though bedridden, was summoned to testify, his truth the final blow. The Pentagon, shamed by public outcry, reinstated his full honors, General Ellis himself delivering the news via a terse video call. "You're a hero, Caldwell," Ellis said, but his eyes avoided Marcus's, guilt flickering. The betrayal of silence, the Pentagon's earlier abandonment, still stung, but Marcus pushed it aside. Lena squeezed his hand, her voice soft. "You're almost home." Aisha turned, her face fierce. "Holt's still out there, Dad. I found his manifesto online. He's rebuilding." Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. Holt's escape was a wound, his son's a cancer not yet cut out. The hospital's TV played Lena's testimony on loop, her words a thunderclap. "My husband fought for this country, and it tried to erase him." Protests swelled globally, justice for Caldwell a rallying cry, but Marcus knew victory was fragile. A week later, he stood before a Senate committee, his suit loose on his weakened frame, his chest wound a dull throb. Lena found Aisha watched from the gallery, their presence his strength. The room buzzed, cameras flashing, senators leaning forward. Marcus's voice, steady despite the pain, laid bare Holt's network. The planted knife, the drugs, the jury bribes, the attacks on his family. He presented Aisha's hacked emails, bank records, and texts, each a nail in the son's coffin. "This wasn't one man," Marcus said, his eyes sweeping the room. "It was a system, and it's still out there." The senators nodded, some visibly shaken, others skeptical but cornered by evidence. The committee chair, a gray-haired woman, promised action, and by day's end federal raids hit Sons' safe houses, their leaders dragged into custody. The nation cheered, headlines screaming, "General vindicated, hate group crushed." Marcus returned to the hospital, exhausted but unbroken, Lena and Aisha at his side. The Pentagon awarded him a public ceremony, his stars polished, his medals gleaming. Crowds gathered, chanting his name, Aisha's viral video now a symbol of triumph. Lena, fully recovered, spoke at the event, her voice carrying, "This is for every black family targeted, every truth buried." Marcus stood tall, his wounds hidden, his heart heavy but proud. For a moment victory felt real, the diner's slap a distant memory, Holt's lies ashes. But the shadow fell at midnight as Marcus rested in a new safe house, a modest apartment, arranged by the network. Aisha burst in, her laptop glowing, her face pale. "Dad, they leaked your missions." Classified files, Marcus's covert cyber operations, hit the dark web, then mainstream news. Caldwell's secrets exposed. The reports twisted his work, missions to thwart enemy hacks, into treason, claiming he'd sold secrets. The nation so quick to cheer wavered, some calling him a traitor. Marcus's stomach churned, the betrayal deeper than Holt's bullet. The Pentagon issued a vague denial, distancing itself, Ellis silent again. Aisha traced the leak to a Sons server. Holt's final card played from hiding. The safe house's walls closed in, Lena's eyes wide with fear, not for herself but for Marcus's legacy. He stood pacing, his wounds aching but his mind a furnace. Holt's manifesto, posted hours later, confirmed it. "Caldwell's fall is our rise. The Sons will return." The words were a vow, a promise of chaos. Marcus's testimony had broken the sun's spine, but Holt, a ghost, was rebuilding, his hate a fire no raid could douse. The news played on, pundits debating Marcus's crimes, his stars tarnished again. Protests split, some chanting for him, others against, the nation fracturing anew. Marcus gathered Lena and Aisha, his voice steady. "We're not safe here, we relocate, start over." The network arranged a new home, a small town in the Midwest, far from Georgia's scars. Marcus, Lena and Aisha packed, their lives now. Boxes and aliases, but their bond iron. Marcus secretly funneled his savings to the network, funding their hunt for Holt, his orders clear. Find him, end this. Aisha, now a network leader, nodded, her hacks sharper, her resolve his mirror. Lena, ever his rock, planned their new life, her strength a light in the dark. They moved under cover of night, the safe house abandoned, their trail cold. Marcus stood in their new home, a modest house with bare walls. His chest wound a faint scar. He looked at Lena, at Aisha, their faces, his reason, his fight. The world saw a general, a hero, a traitor, but they saw him, and that was enough. The TV flickered, a new report. Caldwell scandal deepens. Marcus turned it off, his heart steady. He'd won battles, lost friends, rebuilt lives. Holt's leaks had wounded him, but wounds healed. The network's reports trickled in, Holt's movements traced to a border town, his sons regrouping. Marcus's funding fueled drones, informants, a net tightening. He'd find Holt, not for revenge, but for justice, for every black life targeted, every truth buried. The house was quiet, Lena cooking, Aisha typing, a fragile peace. Marcus stepped outside, the Midwest sky wide, stars glinting like his own. He breathed deep, his chest aching but alive. Holt's manifesto echoed, a threat unfulfilled but real. Marcus's fight wasn't over, but he'd won this round, his family safe, his truth alive. He turned back inside, Lena's smile grounding. Him, Aisha's nod a promise. The war loomed, but Marcus was ready, his general's heart unbroken. Miles away in a shadowed motel, Holt watched a grainy feed, Marcus's new home in his sights. His face scarred from the mill, twisted with hate, his fingers tracing a new plan, his sons whispering, "We rise again." The screen flickered. Marcus's face frozen, Holt's vow a blade in the dark, the battle far from done. The story of Marcus Caldwell reveals the brutal reality of systemic racism and the unbreakable spirit needed to fight it. A black four-star general, Marcus faced a racist cop, Daniel Holt, whose slap in a Georgia diner sparked a war of lies, setups and violence. From a planted knife to drug charges, Holt's Sons of Liberty rigged the system, courts, media, even the Pentagon, to erase Marcus's legacy. Yet Marcus's resilience, honed by 30 years of service, never faltered. His family, Lena and Aisha, stood as pillars, their love and courage defying Holt's hate. The lesson here is clear. Racism isn't just personal. It's a machine manipulating laws, leaking secrets, bombing homes to silence truth. Marcus's fight, through jails, ambushes, and a near-fatal bullet, shows that justice demands sacrifice, strategy, and unwavering belief in one's worth. Holt's escape and manifesto prove the battle isn't over. Racism rebuilds, adapts, strikes again. But Marcus's relocation, his secret funding of the Liberty Network, and his family's resolve teach us that hope endures, even when victory is tainted. Every black life targeted, every truth buried, fuels the fight. We learn to stand like Marcus, not for glory, but for those we love, for the future we owe. Comment number 1. If you've faced injustice and kept fighting, hit like, subscribe, and share to amplify this truth. Thank you for joining Marcus's stand. May you find strength to confront your own battles.